What's up, everyone? And Dr. Shock, if you see this. I saw this post. Natural glasses of Atacama Desert. I don't know like location, so it's obviously like things are new to me. But I'm basically analyzing the Earth based on the interpretation that the magnetic anomaly map is the result of currents that flowed under the crust that led to the Earth's expansion. And so there's currents flowing down this way over to this region that then immediately brought to mind some thoughts when I read this. So even though I don't know details, I basically was like, where is this? Find it, like, okay, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. It's right there in this region. Crazy. Currents. How it was created. Currents. Okay, there's no like boundary map something. I'm more so looking for this. It's really up to about there. That like point sticking into Argentina there. Okay, let's get some labels, I guess. Chile. Argentina. Maybe I can just search for, like, will it show its boundary? Pardon me. It doesn't matter. It's generally here. Probably it's around here. It's hard to tell where that like point sticking in is. Maybe here. So like here. That seems appropriate. So where it says Chile to pretty much the boundary here. Okay, and then all the way past the lake, a major lake there. That must be Lake Titicaca. No. Where's Lake Titicaca? There. Okay, before Lake Titicaca. This body. So basically here. Okay, so we're looking at this region. Down to here. Okay. For sure, this thing is within the boundaries. So we'll come back to that. So this says abstract. This is the Dr. Shock says dates proposed are closer to end of last ice age, not start of younger Dryas. Consider that extraterrestrial mineralogy could be due to major solar outburst as extraterrestrial debris trapped in magnetosphere, etc., falls to Earth. Interesting. Because essentially I'm analyzing this from the angle that the Earth expanded, and it did so by basically a planetary supernova where it physically grew to a new radius, and in part a current flowed underneath the totality of the pre-existing crust which was a pre-existing crust, just like the Earth is one crust that, like, if a current flowed under it, it would flow under all of it, and then, even though, because it's pretty imbalanced, like the oceanic crust is missing a entirety of continental crust atop it, so it's kind of thinner. So it's not quite as balanced as it was. It was more just one crust. Generally continental shelf. And then a current flowed from a puncture hole in the western India, Pakistan, actually, in Pakistan, very eastern Pakistan. And it flowed in all directions, and then it shaped over time to be what we see and filled the totality of the earth, and then began to expand the earth because it had nowhere else to go except for between the boundaries that it was forming by the currents flowing. Essentially, the current flowed out in all directions and then began to shape itself, which then ended up being the boundaries, like of Laurentia, for instance, and just the boundaries. And then the currents flowed around the boundaries, between the boundaries. And at some point, the whole of the earth became so filled with currents that the only thing it could do was just flow out of the into like the freely expanding space between the continents, because essentially what's happening as it's filling the underneath the crust of the earth, it's also applying a pressure, dividing the continents, separating the crust by the boundary. Essentially, by forming boundaries, it then collides with the boundary and goes up, down, and basically saws the crust apart. Probably related to ancient technology. Some understanding of that applied that I'm not applying or even thinking about right now, but in essence, they then managed to sever the continents sufficiently where the bonds between them break, where they're no longer a single unit. They become 7 continents. And then the physical bonds break between them, which is, for instance, if it's physically visible on the ocean here, where Papua New Guinea was here, and its bonds are here, and the bonds break, and this is everywhere, and basically impacts like Chicxulub. Mind you, this all began 550 million years radiometric dating. And it actually occurred in the time of ancient Dwarka, when Dwarka was attacked by a vortex weapon. I know. It actually occurred then, so it was only like 10,000 years ago when this process began. Or whatever exactly. I haven't thought about it that much because I've been working on the, like, what is going on details, and then like that seems like something that can be fine-tuned as the like bigger picture becomes more clear, to bring resolution to the bigger picture, but not to like be like out of sequence in the process. I haven't really, like, I just say like 10,000 years ago, but that's probably not exact. Okay. But essentially, then the whole of the Earth expansion process was that a vortex was allowing for space to flow into the beyond the mantle, into the mantle, and causing it to flow, which is also maybe a little questionable to geologists, that the mantle is just flowing like it's Pahoho lava of Hawaii flowing, but that's what happened. How exactly it flowed like that, maybe it's cold enough where when we look now it looks solid, but at that time it was more fluid because space did flow in, which is cold, so it mixed, so it probably did like lead to some solidification that we just assume has always been present, but was maybe created in the process as a like, I don't know, not to suggest anything about that. I don't know, but there was flow. That's the general gist of what's going on here. Is that there was a current, and it was flowing, and it was causing things, and it wasn't just flowing in one direction. It was flowing in all directions from a point, shaping the currents that flowed by the rotation of the earth that led to basically a fanning out of the currents in the direction, like assisted by the rotation, and then a focusing of the currents by the directions that are like in the direction, the current in the direction of the rotation. So like it's because it's moving with the rotation, it's more like easily bent off its path, so it has to stay very like focused, but then it becomes like a focused beam that has a higher velocity, where over here just like fans out, and these flows then flow throughout the earth and shape the end results. And so one of the things going on is there's that current coming across here from the puncture hole in Pakistan. Sorry, Pakistan. I've said India all along. It occurred to me recently. It's Pakistan. Like it occurred in India, but it's like the mantle puncture hole is in Pakistan. Okay. So then the current flows this way. And then I believe like it suddenly solidifies. I've been thinking in my last video I mentioned, it maybe not, I don't know, but I've been thinking that it's like flowing very fluid, laminar, like just low viscosity flow, and then it suddenly becomes a high viscosity flow here because I believe it ran into the ocean that existed on the continental crust. Like its influence on the region led to essentially cooling the lava flows enough to solidify them and create a more dense like wall that then produced Laurentia's boundaries, and then the current ended up like flowing around the boundaries this way. But then the opposing current is flowing from the mantle puncture hole eastward and being focused, but before the earth expanded, eastward is more this way, essentially. And it goes up this way because it also is deflecting off of Laurentia. So even though it's like going initially straight, it still is caused to deflect up and goes physically around this pole and shapes the pole by basically bringing dense material just to be like squished into it over time. And then the current flows around this pole, and then basically, oops, around where, sorry. Let's start back over here real quick. It flows from here, up here, up here, up here, up here, around the pole. Some of it just goes straight in here. But then as this fills, it's more like forced this way, which then it's like forced through the current. So once this region, which like the Siberian Traps is earlier in the process, once this region like fills with pressure, it's more forced to flow this way. And so the current flows this way down here, and then it starts to interact with this current, especially down here, which leads into the shaping of islands along this coast, which are Papua New Guinea and et al. Pardon me. And then Philippines were up here with Sulawesi and North Maluku there. Solomon Islands down past Papua New Guinea, extending down here, which was connected here. Essentially, this region was over here, and then this region was over, like, adjacent here initially, but then they suddenly separated when the undercurrent from here flowing through this general region from I believe under Solomon Islands flowing specifically into South America, it then branched out and fanned outward because it had less pressure of a countercurrent here, because the current flowing from the mantle puncture hole wasn't like so widespread to be like evenly distributed pressure down to South America. It really focused the pressure more so through Europe and the Mediterranean and then across into North America. And so when that crossing current passed it, it's able to fan out in the region, but then this fills this region and it fills over, fans out, and it physically flows over into here and fills this region. So South America and Africa get like filled by this opposing current that then runs into this current and kind of like cycles back into that current. Or cycles down depending on like which side of this it flows on, producing a plutonic complex here. All sorts of features along the way being produced by these currents flowing, which I've just like in passing, just by simply just saying these currents, like things can be described without even like talking about it, like these. All of this plutonic complex here is pretty much this current flowing, especially at like that boundary of that system and flowing up into the counter current flowing that way generally. And then a current ends up flowing in here and crossing this current that's coming across through the middle there. Here. So this kind of stuff is going on. Okay, so before I get too distracted and go back, let's get back to Atacama Desert. This current, though, is flowing through here. Mind you, just for like more completion's sake, this current flows through here, and because it runs into this current, it fans out and goes up this way and goes down this way. So there's like a mixing of like the focus beam and the dense systems that kind of goes on here, which I believe is kind of why there's all this added material in this region. Is this focus beam is bringing material with it that's solidified enough that it's actually like denser particles within the subtle like river that just get transported, but then essentially reach a point where the pressures balance them, and that's where it sits when the system stabilizes. The process ends because it was basically like a reaction, like equilibrium, transition phase, equilibrium. So then the current flowing this way though is going into here. I don't know what that was. Into South America and filling up that region, but at some point the back pressure gets so high that it starts to physically like separate, and then this region moves over here. Like there's this separation that occurs, and then it moves back over this way. And in the process, essentially the current that was flowing underneath here, maybe I have some details wrong, admittedly, in terms of exact details, but generally speaking, I believe this is more in the direction of what happened, is there were currents flowing, and so they're like these currents are producing like eddies where they collide. They produce like here there's this huge like compass structure where they're colliding. There's this main current, and then because essentially this is more fluid here, this is the more dense material that it's just flowing around, like it currents do in lava. And so essentially it fills this region and starts to physically separate. And this separation, though, it doesn't stop the current. The current is still flowing, and as the earth expands, I believe what it did was it focused energy into South America, especially like at points like this, it got locked in. Like the current is flowing. There's a current flowing, and there's this wall, and the current's flowing, and it's flowing, and then it starts to like create a notch, and it gets stuck in the notch, and just kind of. But then it's like bends because the actual object emitting the current is still moving. Like even though the current gets stuck over here, and the end of the underbelly of the crust that it's emitted from, where it's flowing from, is still moving. And so it essentially gets stuck, it moves, gets stuck, and here it really gets stuck. But in this whole stretch, we see repetitively it's happening. And maybe even down here. So I would say that aspect is maybe related. I'm not sure if the glasses specifically, so like fireballs, maybe like there's, it's not just an undercurrent, it's also like an explosiveness that radiates heat. Like just the sheer quantity of heat flowing there, maybe. Because I mean, it was a current that physically produced a flame structure under the totality of the northern section of South America. That is a current. And it's probably a hot current that expanded as soon as it was able. And so when it flowed over here, it must have filled this region with heat. Mind you, let's go to some animations. So let's just go through these a little bit, because these are really relevant to this. I created this one. Essentially, these bonds and these like structures here are suggestive that they were physically there. And so down further, I haven't actually done this one. Papua New Guinea has this segment branching off at the Bismarck Archipelago and then Solomon Islands. This whole stretch, basically, a current was flowing this way into South America, and when it stopped flowing into South America, it then started to physically move away because of separation. It wasn't that it stopped flowing, it just separation. It was flowing underneath it, and then separation occurred, so it started flowing physically into it and along it, where the current flowed along the boundary that was created of South America and created this shape and created basically a vortex in this location, because we can see it here where the current is colliding with this current. So like as this moves away, it's colliding with this current physically in this location before this the eastern region of Pacific Ocean was formed, really, right here. The newer crust was formed. Before that was formed, the current was flowing counter to, or from under Papua New Guinea and then through Solomon Islands and then out into the open space where it ran into the boundary of South America. And then at that boundary, the current from here was flowing down to here, I guess. It must have been flowing all the way down to here. I've been thinking that some of this went up this way. And maybe it did to create this in a way, but other than that, I don't think it flowed past, like, actually up here, now that I'm realizing that aspect of it. I was thinking it was more so flowing out here, and then just, like, from this little kind of point branching. But I'm thinking, like, this was more so, like, in there. But then it started to actually physically move apart Papua New Guinea, so that the current that's actually flowing, Papua New Guinea's current, is flowing from up here, this current, flowing down through here, through underneath Papua New Guinea, under Solomon Islands. And so it's a crossing current that where they are, like, the boundary of them is this spiral forming, or this system with a magnetic field forming. Which is here, and here's Fiji. So we can tell, here's Fiji. Here's Fiji. These volcanic islands, this structure in the magnetic field formed by these crossing currents that must have flowed this way, because this current's going this way, so it encourages this portion to go this way. And then down here, and then this goes with this current. So it was physically producing beyond the boundary of South America, because South America, its boundary would have been generally here. So, like, beyond the boundary into this region, this system that was forming is causing an like undercurrent that's actually, like, physically spiraling here in a figure eight, pretty much. That because it is just stuck there flowing, it's just this undercurrent of heat just bringing, like, energy, like electricity does, like, versus no, like, current, like, it's shocking the region with heat. And that's probably central to the glasses being formed here. I find it a little, it's certainly anomalous in terms of the time frame. So maybe as this system moves away, the undercurrent is not actually, like, radiating upward so much as just, like, being maybe in this region, maybe here, and maybe this point then, because essentially it seems like this system was up in this corner here. So maybe down here at this boundary, it's almost like a flame above the system. Maybe like a gamma ray jet or a jet. But from here, focused here, where that's what exactly is focusing on it, because the currents are not quite at that angle. Like one's coming in here. Actually, I guess it wouldn't have. Yeah, it was before. While this is over here, so it's kind of down here. Wait. I might be positioning that wrong. Maybe it's more here. Or just not occurring at the exact boundary, more so like out here. But that doesn't really make sense for the shape. Like it seems like it was forced to a wall here, right here. So that beam is shooting down here. Let's keep looking at that beam then, because it looks like that beam that's drilling in here then is kind of just carving this stretch out. Like it keeps, the energy doesn't just sit here. It meets resistance by this current flowing this way, so it gets kind of just propagated down in, maybe down a balance line of all the larger currents that are occurring, because there's a current flowing under here from this direction that's pretty nearby. Maybe even initially is the boundary. No. That current, I think, flows this way. Initially. So that's my thoughts, I guess. I'm sorry that it's not like some absolute thing in terms of like, okay, I did it. There's a lot of like question marks surrounding what exactly is going on, where this was, if this was happening, where it was, if it was happening, where it was. Maybe here was the position that was at some point, and then maybe that would have been focusing down this way, and just physically, initially, maybe this is what like physically opened. That makes sense. Like initially, it was going here, like here, and then it started to open, and then here, like spots down this way, but then it starts to open, so it gets more focused in the direction of this current, the current coming under Solomon Islands, which is a focus current, whereas the other current is really wide and further up here, really. So maybe it's focusing there. Sorry. essentially focusing down at different points. I mean, it's plausible. I don't know if that's completely reasonable. Maybe this is more of a secondary focus then. Like this whole thing is kind of like a... Because I'm not sure what's going on with these. I've run into this more than once where there's a really like laminar side of a system like this that has a field like this, and then a very like this thing kind of side. It seems like the current flowing this way is also colliding still with the current flowing this way across this whole width. But it really even goes up here. Up here, though, its collision plays into Australia's ammonite structure underneath it by the crossing currents plus this current. These three currents in this location, because essentially this is going down the boundary here initially, and then it fans out this way. That's probably even what's going on here, is it's moving and leaving behind mounds, essentially causing mounds, which happened in Gujarat, in Saurashtra. Where is it here? Essentially where a current flowed this way, created a mound that then caused the current that was still flowing this way to be face resistance, and then it bent off of it around it, which then led to an imbalance where this system was generally putting the current this way, more so it seems, which is in preferential to the rotation of the Earth, just like the fanning out versus focus beam aspect. So that makes sense, kind of, that it would fan out, but more so go this way with maybe a focus beam over here that's more able to just carve underneath. Then here, it physically moves, and this mound, like, it basically by it moving, like, it's filled this region, but it's hitting a resistance over here that's causing it to deflect around, but there's resistance here, so it just kind of eddies here, producing mountain hills, Barda Hills and Alec Hills. And then it flows this way where it interacts with this current, but then the vortex that punctured the mantle is moving through the region, and it moved over here. And then it physically moves down here when this region fills up with resistance. Like, there's too much, this region fills, so it moves down further to fill in this region, which it hasn't really pushed into this region. Here got pushed into, here got pushed into, this region it's more so just flowed into. And then it flows over here, flows into Girnar pretty much, and just shapes the region. So it seems like something like that's going on here. And then as it fans out, the tip is initially here, then South America moves away. So this is pretty much being formed with the moving away of South America. Oh my god. Let's go back to animations. Here we go. So here's Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands. Current flowing into that location with the North America here generally. How exactly this was, I guess it was more like Unclear. I certainly did not account for everything in this region, although this is really interesting that this structure is maybe even in a somewhat relationship to the things I just happen to put over top it. Like this also here, this, there's like an island, but then here there's like a lake, a big one, that maybe is reminiscent of what's going on over here. Anyway, where maybe as it moves, it like this line is along this boundary, but it moved over to here, but it's stabilized here, and then it moved like abruptly. So like this starts to move away. Here it starts to move away. And maybe even down to here. Oh. So then it moves down to here, I guess. Down this way. It just opens up a general space while staying connected to North America, but maybe also opening up a space between them by this happening. I'm not sure. I haven't eaten yet. 1 o'clock, I haven't eaten yet. Oh my god. I'm gonna kill myself. Generally, though, the current focuses here, drills into it, and maybe starts to produce a mound. I'm not sure the shapes of this. Like, this looks like here, like here. So initially it moves away. Here's the current flowing out into that point and taking a first boundary of it, I guess. The first imprint of it. Outprint, imprint. And then it moves up this way to here as a second boundary, maybe, with, so I guess this is actually where Central America and the, like, here's, sorry, so already something I realized is wrong in what I was saying. Where the current was flowing into this point initially, but then it starts to move away, and so it's not flowing directly into it. It's more so flowing into the crack that's opening, which is what's happening. Is it's like cracking open this space, like a V from a point initially, but then it more so from here later on as like the crack itself like opens wider in the back. So initially here though, then it like widens to this point, I guess. At which point maybe I really need to eat. This stuff's maybe related to Central America, and they're breaking and then rebonding maybe. Although I don't know why. Like the current, I guess the current is flowing here. Like it must be here. South America starts to move away. From Australia and North America. But as it's doing it, it's like physically stripping a chunk of North America from it, or vice versa. And that bond holds on strong enough that it causes a separation to be encouraged between North America and Australia at all. But initially, the current's flowing here and out into this region, I guess, and just filling here, but then flowing down this way, like generally down this way, and swirling up this way, I guess, but then filling down here. Which maybe is over here-ish, initially. Oh my god. I really need to eat. Okay. So with that in mind, I'll be back. Peace out.